Hello. Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing today? It's great to see you all. Um, Thank you for inviting me back to talk more about teaching. That's one of my favorite things. Today we're going to pick up where we left off from our last workshop. We're going to take the learning that we did last time and we're going to add more of a lens to it that is grounded in what you do in class, okay? So today when I talk, I'm going to talk as if you have a class. You may have a class that you have interned in before, but you may also not have one. So as we talk, whenever I say in your class, it could be your like imaginary hypothetical class, but it could also be your actual class that you have right now, all right? So, welcome back. This is a picture of my daughter, and the reason why this picture is here is because my daughter in this picture is like almost 5, but looks 17. And I just looked at this picture of her when I took it. Well, I took this picture for a reason. I just saw my daughter as like a learner for like a very clear picture in time. And of course, all our kids are learners. But in this moment, I just saw like a lot of wisdom in my daughter. And the reason why I wanted to put this picture here is because that's going to be a big part of what we talk about today, is seeing all kids as capable of wisdom, even at a really young age. So, when I go here, it didn't change. Okay, it might not be an issue, but when I changed it here, it changed here, but it didn't change here. We'll see what happens. So, with a partner, let's get started. What have you tried or noticed? See, it does that. Yeah, okay, well, I can't look at this and this. What did you try or notice since workshop 1? Where do you see God at work through your service? And I want you to reflect quietly for a second, and then I want you to share with a neighbor. And I want you to see if your lens has shifted at all. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say, for example, you are not in a class right now, but you work with kids in some other aspect of church, or you're just in liturgy and you're noticing kids in the community. Has something about your lens shifted since the last time we worked together? And let's say, for example, you didn't attend the last workshop. Just take a minute to think about the way you're noticing service with children in this church, and talk to the person next to you. All right. Does anyone want to share something that came up for them? Mark, you want to share?
Sure. Yes, so one thing I tried in this class, like leading a talk in this class, has been, instead of just opening the question to the whole group, having people discuss on their own, or I'm sorry, like, in smaller groups amongst each other, and then if anyone wants to share after that, I think, like you said, it allows you to like process the answer a little better and then maybe feel more comfortable saying it out loud. But even if you don't say it out loud, you benefited something more because you had that discussion with someone else. Yeah.
And it's a place to take risks, right? Like if you take risks grappling or processing something with a person, it's a lot easier to take a risk with one person when you're sharing, when you're a kid especially. And then if you want to share with the whole group, you've had some verbal or physical like affirmation that what you've said has merit, right? So it just increases engagement with kids. Does anyone have anything else they want to share? We're going to need to wake you up a little bit. Do you need coffee? Okay. All right. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about power. Yeah, I don't know what's up. It's fine. We're going to talk about power. We're going to talk about building classroom community. We're going to talk about something called problem-posing education, which is like one of my favorite things to talk about, because once you know about problem-posing education, you're never going to look at teaching in the same way ever again. Some practical strategies, and then we're going to close. So everything that we talked about in our last workshop, I am assuming you have at least like 1% memory of that, and we're going to build off of that. But even if you were not at the last workshop, it's okay, and you should be able to take something away from today. So here is a quick refresher. So in the last workshop, we talked about a few principles. We talked about the zone of proximal development, which is the space between what kids know, what they need to know, and the space in between that, right? They have to feel safe in order for them to gain knowledge. We talked about transfer of learning, and we talked about Christ-centered teaching. And a big question we asked was, what kind of teacher would Christ be? And we said our Coptic church traditions are grounded in the essential belief that anything that we look at with our kids has to be from an asset-based point of view, not a deficit. Is this me? Okay. So, does anyone remember that? Does anyone remember we talked about an asset view versus a deficit view? And there's lots of different things that we look at on a regular basis where we have to challenge ourselves to look at kids from an asset-based view. And we talked about also being a trauma-informed educator and a trauma-informed servant. Trauma-informed service is based on 4 different principles. It's based on, these are not new, so I talked about these last time. It's based on predictability, flexibility, empowerment, and connection. So anytime you're making a decision in your class, you should always think about those 4 tenets of trauma-informed education. And remember last time we had different examples. I can share the slideshow with Mark, and he can share it with you. He can share it with you if you'd like to revisit those concepts, okay? And we talked about asset-based versus deficit-based views. We're just going to have this, like, rap tone in the background, okay? And then we also talked about unconditional positive regard, where what we think of kids is not dependent on their behavior, right? Like sort of like Christ. If Christ based the way he views us or loves us based on our behavior, he wouldn't love us because we're very imperfect. But if we are basing our behavior or our view of kids based on what they do, then really we're not being Christ-centered teachers, right? So again, this is just review. So I want to talk about your ideal Sunday school class. So I want you to like daydream a little bit with me. So in your ideal Sunday school class, and we may not have time to talk about all these things, I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk about this, but what are your weekly classroom routines? And who decides how the class runs? And then how do routines help kids feel safe, especially those who've experienced instability? I just want to visit this for a second because you may not have been at the last workshop. We talked about the population that we serve. The population that we serve is not a monolithic population. It could be people who have just moved to the United States from Egypt 2 years ago. It could be someone who grew up here and is like me, like they moved here when they were younger and they now have kids who were born here. It could be someone who's not Egyptian, right? It could be someone who is not Egyptian and married into the faith. It could be someone who didn't marry into the faith, but just found the faith on their own and is new to this community and maybe doesn't look like everyone else and has different experiences. I promise I'm not. All of these identities of people are in our community, and it's important that we think about the ideal class, whoever is in that class, everyone is different. And that means that we can't have the idea that like one size fits all, okay? So, I want you to have a conversation in groups of 3 about these questions. And I'm going to start a timer for you. Let's just make sure that there's no sound on. All right. No sound. Yes, yes. I'm actually just going to go back. Forget the timer. Okay. No, it's the last time I did this, we had also handouts and the printer wasn't working. So get in groups of 3. I'm going to set a timer of like 8 minutes. We'll come back at 12:10, and I want you to talk through some of these questions, okay? If you don't have time to talk through all of them, it's okay if you engage with just like 2. Okay, go. On your mark, get set, go. And if you want to do groups of 2, that's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Just talk to people. come back together. All right, does anyone want to share something that came up for them in the conversation?
Usually for routine, I think usually what I remember is that first thing they do is like a quick prayer, and then they give the kids snacks and drinks, like, because I know right out mass, most of them are hungry, they're running around. So you let them like calm down a bit, like eat, drink, and after you like eat everything, calm down a little, then you usually start the lesson. So usually let them eat and drink a little, and then we go into a lesson usually.
Comment on something you said. Having a meal in class or like having a snack or anything, I know that not all classes do that, and I don't think we actually have, no, it's okay. This is your fault. I don't think we have like a set, wow, it feels like I'm in like a concert hall now. I don't think we have like a set rule about food in class or not, but I do like when we have food, we have something for the kids to eat, and they just kind of slowly transition into the class. Because I think transitions are a big deal for some kids. So if you give them set time, then they can kind of like regroup and come back together. I love that, Mark. Does anyone else have anything they want to share? Okay, maybe you'll share as we move forward, okay? But I really liked some of the things I heard. So, one of the things that I would really like us all to walk away from today is community building as something that is intentional in class. Community building is not something that is like a side activity in our class. And I will just tell you, the best servants that I had growing up were ones that were actually really intentional about building community, but they didn't make me feel like I was doing it. So they would come in, they would tell a story about themselves, and I would feel like I knew them better as people, and that would be one way they would build community, but didn't make me feel like it was like this cheesy thing that they're doing. So that is very important. Children cannot learn unless they feel a sense of belonging and a sense of community, and feeling like that belonging is not conditional. If I walk into a class and I know that I'm perceived as the bad kid, what's gonna make me wanna come back to that class? But what if like I'm really active and I come to class and I'm like off the wall, I'm even like quote unquote disrespectful at times? That's like a real challenge, right? Like that's a challenge that people have. So sometimes part of my service is I go to different classes and I'll help people with like, I'll call it like a problem of practice. So helping some of the middle school classes with like challenging behavior, or helping some of the high school classes with engagement and deeper connection with the curriculum. Sometimes you can say, no, this is a really challenging class, but you may have to adjust your goal of what you're gonna get done in that class. Because if my goal in the class is not the kids' goal, like if my goal is like, I have this curriculum from the Southern Diocese and I will get through lesson A through F, it will happen, and I don't care what these kids feel, you are gonna learn this information. But what if the kids' goal is seeing their friends, having a meal, because remember we talked about how everybody in our church is different. They have a different experience at home. Some kids, food is not a problem. There might be other kids where there's like real food insecurity in the home. What if I know I can come to church, I'm gonna have time with my friends, it's a safe place for me to learn, and I'm gonna have a meal. And I'm gonna have a spiritual meal too because I had communion. All of those things are what kids think about. They're not thinking, I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna disrespect Mark. I'm gonna make sure his life is a living, you know what? Okay, I can't say that here. So, I'm gonna just keep going. I'm sorry to just keep going, but I'm gonna keep going just for the sake of time. So there are things that we can do to make sure our kids feel safe when they walk into the class, and they are gonna build community and connection. And they can be something as simple as like a check-in question. Like you just walked in, everybody's sitting in a circle or everybody's sitting in rows. Can 5 people give me their high and low of the week? And you'd be surprised, like if that's not something that you've been doing in the class, it might feel weird at first, But kids will actually start to share, and they're gonna build that sense of connection and community in the class. You can do like one time in the 6th grade class, we did something called the thankfulness circle, where I made each kid go around, and they were like, this is so boring. But then like some kids were like, I'm really thankful when my mom makes me what I end up. Like, it was really cute. So that you can do something like that, where everybody just goes around in the circle, says something they're thankful for, or whatever it is that you want to give them. Invite them to lead a prayer, and even if they say for the 1,100th time, thank you, God, so much for letting the people who didn't come this week come next week, or whatever it is that's been said since the beginning of time, okay, that prayer, that's okay, that's fine. Or you can share a favorite meal or favorite tradition. I just recently observed a class where someone was talking about one of the holidays or one of the feasts in our church, and they just talked about the food that their parents would make for them when they were young during this feast. That's something that's really small that helps kids feel that sense of connection, and it's also a way to make sure that you're honoring their cultural identity, okay? That's really, really important. So these are some more community building routines, and I'm gonna share this slideshow so that people can just have this. So, greeting the kids by name at the door, really easy one. Helper of the day, and let me tell you, be careful about how you select helper of the day. Sometimes I feel like I go to classes and it's the same helper of the day every time, and I'll ask someone and they'll be like, well, this kid is really horribly behaved, so when I make him a helper, okay, like there's some intention and thinking behind that, but make sure that other people become helpers too, because sometimes someone can be really quiet, but they really want to be seen. So helping them being seen as a helper is something that makes them feel visible. For middle school, a high and low, and again, it's optional to share, they don't have to share. And this is something that you could do maybe with the older kids, or even the middle school kids, some silent like journaling, but not an actual journal. You can give them a Post-it, and you can say, hey, we just talked about this verse. What does it mean to you? Quickly write it on a Post-it. Share it with the person next to you. Again, it doesn't have to be rocket science. You're just trying to engage them, and you can do it in such simple ways. For high school, open-ended questions. Don't give such definitive questions. Open-ended questions. And student-led reflection. And I'm going to give you some examples of that today. Okay? So, now we get to the deep, good stuff. Who here has heard of an educator named Paulo Freire? Yes, I know you have. So Paulo Freire, when I learned about him, my whole life changed. I learned about him when I was like 20 or 21, and I'm not 22, so, I mean, it was a while ago. Unless you think I'm 22, that's fine. He is an educator who is known as someone who was like the father of liberatory education, okay? And he was a revolutionary through his work and through his education research. He came up or coined 2 different kinds of education. The first is banking education, and I'm gonna read this to you and you can tell me how you feel about it. But I think probably because you know me by now, you're gonna know what I think of this. So banking education is a traditional approach where the teacher deposits information into students as if they're empty containers. And the teacher has all the knowledge, and the student's job is to listen, memorize, and repeat. Okay, well, I forgot that I wrote why it's a problem on this slide. But now you know how I feel about it. It's a problem. But unfortunately, it's very, very common in our church. So, it's a problem because it silences kids' voices, because you're centering all of the teacher talk. And I'm not saying that like when you're teaching, there's not gonna be a period of time where you literally have to give information. That's fine. Should it be an hour? That's a question mark, right? If you have servants prep students, if I gave you a 1-hour lecture, I mean, I don't think that's a good idea, but you're not gonna like run out of here and start screaming, okay? Because developmentally, you are okay with that. What about a 1st grade class? If you make a PowerPoint and you ask 1st graders to sit down for the entirety of that 1-hour PowerPoint, are they gonna have a good time? Absolutely not. Even a 9th grader is not gonna have a good time, because what you've given them the message of is, you're the expert, I'm a depository, you're gonna give me information, my job is to sit here and listen. I'm not wise in any kind of way. I don't bring any assets to this class. I go, and depending on whatever level of engagement you are bringing, I'm still expected to sit there and listen. I don't like it. So, in the banking concept of education, knowledge is a gift bestowed by those who consider themselves knowledgeable upon those who they consider to know nothing. Can you raise your hand if you think that the kids in our class bring knowledge with them? Absolutely they do. All your hands should be raised. Where are your hands? Okay. The kids in our class bring knowledge with them. Do they bring wisdom? They bring wisdom. I'm just going to use myself as an example. When I was 4 years old, I immigrated from Egypt to America. I very early on had to learn how to adapt to different contexts. That is a very big skill. I had to go to my school and speak English, then go home and speak Arabic. I had to code switch. When I would go to certain places, I would get signs that, oh, we're celebrating all of the American holidays. I don't see any of the Coptic holidays. I had to know when it was safe for me to be who I really am internally, and when I had to kind of let that take a back seat. All at the age of 4. All of us in this room have had to do different things like that. I don't care if you didn't immigrate to the United States and you were born here, you still had to do things like that. So kids inherently bring wisdom with them, and they bring skills, and they bring extreme adaptability. Just think about the fact that we're not living in a Christian world. Just that alone is something that alone makes our kids very smart, very wise, strong, and resilient. That manifests in different ways, but they all have that. And they really have that really at its core because they have the Holy Spirit. So, problem-posing education was the theory that Paulo Freire proposed in response to banking education. So problem-posing education is a way of teaching that invites students to think, question, and co-create meaning, not memorize answers. It doesn't mean you can't give a 20-minute lesson or a 15-minute lesson where you're sharing information with the kids. It does mean that the way you think about them getting that information has to be different than, I'm giving you information, I'm expecting you to memorize a verse, you're saying it back to me, here's a pencil. And it invites reflection and ownership, and it connects faith to daily life, especially meaningful for students from immigrant, trauma-impacted, or silenced backgrounds. And this does mean asking open-ended questions, welcoming silence, and saying, I don't know, what do you think? There's always that kid that is in every class, where they ask a question and they're being silly, okay? And they're like, I'm gonna ask you a question. I know you're not gonna know the answer, and this is my moment to shine. It's okay. You can say to them, I don't know. Like the power of your servant who you look up to so much that says, I don't know. What do you think? What does that indicate to them? That indicates to them that they have wisdom and assets that they bring to the class, and the class is a place where you're not creating the meaning on your own, you're co-creating the meaning, okay? So, here are some simple questions, some simple statements where you're just gonna kind of notice this shift. So, in banking education, you're gonna say, here's what the story means. But in problem-posing education, you might say, what do you notice in this story? And giving silence, like give time for silence. So let's say, for example, you're going through this lesson, 15, 20 minutes, and then you're asking the kids throughout these questions, what do you notice? If you ask them the question and they don't respond right away, whose fault is that? That's your fault. It's no one's fault. This is not a blame game. But you have to give them time to process, okay? So if you give them, hey, 2 minutes, talk to the person next to you. What do you notice in this story? And then they respond, that's good, because you want to give them time to think. Teacher-centered versus shared leadership. A really simple way for you to actually establish a class at the beginning of the year is, hey, you guys are in 4th grade. We're going to be starting this class this year. I'm so excited for you to join this class. Can we write 3 or 4 norms together that we're going to make sure everybody abides by, including me? And what if you wrote those together? Like, for example, my daughter's 6. She loves when people follow directions, which I don't know what that says about me. But she's like, Mama, Luke, he's not sharing, and she'll come and she'll tell me, Luke is not sharing. I can imagine my daughter being someone who, if you said, we're gonna write these norms together, even in kindergarten, she'll be like, okay, we're all gonna share, or we're all gonna be kind to each other. And how powerful would that be for the kids who are in your class to be like, I actually had a personal hand in deciding the rules for our class. And how good will that make them feel? Repeating information versus sharing lived experience. I think sometimes we really want to make sure that kids get information, and so we'll repeat that information over and over again instead of kind of activating other factors or other parts of their brain and maybe sharing a personal story that the verse reminded you of or that story reminded you of. They'll probably remember it better if you share the story versus just sharing the verse over and over again. So this is, so I recently just went to Egypt. I just came back from Egypt, and I'll share something that I got the privilege of doing. So I am doing my doctoral dissertation right now, and one thing I got I honestly, an immense lucky moment for me is someone was able to connect me with a professor from American University in Cairo who is doing research on my topic of research, which has to do with children from immigrant backgrounds and their access to advanced coursework in schools. So it was really, really awesome. I got to meet with her. But I also got to go to the university press and look at books that are written in Egypt about education. So I brought a prop, and I'm going to pass it around. This book, I have really enjoyed reading it thus far, although I'm not done because I just came back. And it's actually a book about schools in Egypt and the way that they have ideologically and civically functioned. So they've always been for some sort of civic function. It could be religious. It could be to make people vote a certain way. It could be if there's a lot of Islamic influence in schools in Egypt, unless you go to a private school, you can imagine how those experiences in education would be different. But many people in our community have grown up in Egypt. Many people in our community have grown up here. So it's really important to think about our roots and to think about how schools function and what people bring with them in their invisible backpack. So this is a really cool book. I really love St. Habib Girgis because he is the modern father of Sunday school, and just everything about the way he designed Sunday school and the way that he thought about serving. You don't want to stay? Oh, okay, good. Okay. Everything about the way he designed Sunday school and the purpose for it was meant to make the church continue to grow and become fruitful. So I think it's really important for us as we serve. You're not just serving on your own as a standalone human being. You're a servant of Christ, but you also bring all the history of your own Sunday school experiences with you. And if you grew up with parents that grew up in Egypt, for example, I know for me, when I was growing up, my mom would be like, there's no studying here at all. I would be studying, and she's in the back and she's laughing at me. She would be like, I used to study until midnight in 3rd grade. And I would be like, okay, well, I'm 8. We're not going to do that. Right, Abuna? Yes, yeah, yes. So, it's just important to think about the fact that we're not just on our own. We're not standalone. Everything that we do is going to come with an invisible backpack of experiences, both our own and our kids. So, let's talk through some scenarios. So scenario 1, this is for elementary school. Let's say, for example, the topic is Noah's Ark. So in banking education is, why did God flood the earth? You're asking that question. And the response is, because people were bad. You accept that response and you're done. Problem posing, how do you think Noah felt? See how those questions are different? Because in that scenario, you're asking a deeper question. How do you think Noah felt, and what helped him trust God? And that's also application of learning, because the kids could be in experiences where they're really being pushed to trust God the way Noah had to. For middle school, let's say you're talking about temptation. I know they do the purity retreat in middle school, okay? What should we do when we're tempted? Pray and say no. I mean, yes, do that. Say no and pray. But why is it hard to make good choices sometimes? What helps you resist? Sam, my husband, he teaches in the 7th and 8th grade boys class. He said one of the recent things that he's seen happen in his class that is really powerful is when they talk about the purity topics, right? Like those are really challenging topics. They're talking about them, it's all boys. They're talking about real challenges that people experience when they're in those ages, both boys and girls. He said that one of the most powerful things that has helped the kids really connect and click and trust is that the servants are sharing their experiences with them. For high school, and you're talking about forgiveness, Christ says to forgive, so we do. Is it hard to forgive someone who hasn't apologized, and why? Because I think sometimes we think service and teaching is a performance, and we say things like, I'm gonna just be blunt with you. One of the biggest problems I think in any Coptic community is there are good servants and there are bad servants. And people are like, oh yeah, make that person sign up for everything. That person's such a great servant. But everyone is a good servant. Everyone has gifts and they have talents. It's just about, are we giving them the opportunity to showcase those talents? Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So these are more examples. You can see Noah's Ark, the problem-posing approach. Take a minute and talk to the person next to you and have someone be the teacher and someone be the student. Say these things out loud. Oh, partner up. Role play. Just read them out loud to each other. So you can see that, first of all, you did a great job. You guys are taking acting classes or something. You're doing great. You can see that it's not that the first one is wrong. It's not wrong. If I ever saw that, I wouldn't think that's wrong. But if that's all you're doing, then I would say it's incomplete. You're not giving the kids an opportunity to engage deeper. All right, let's go to the next one. So again, temptation and choices. So go ahead, do the same awkward thing that you just did. You can see how one of these responses, it's validating, right? And then for high school. So go ahead. You guys are doing a great job. I'm really making you do annoying things. So sometimes with older grades, they will give you a response that's not quite comfortable for you to hear. Do you know how sometimes we're working through something as adults, and we might know how we should feel about something, but we may not have arrived there yet. You might be upset about something that's a reality in our world, right? You might be someone who is experiencing challenges, at work. You might know how you should feel about something, but you might not feel that way yet. kids are still developmentally grappling with how they should feel, and they don't know what that is yet, and they're saying it out loud to you. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're talking about forgiveness. We talked about this here. And the kids are talking about, well, I really don't feel like this person deserves forgiveness, okay? Like, I know that something that came up when I was growing up was there were two, like, terrorist attacks on Coptic churches that we grappled with here. I don't know if you remember them. One of them was the Church of Nega Hamedi, and then, like, we also had, like, security here at church. Do you remember that? Uncle Eilid was, like, wearing the SWAT uniform. So I remember, like, talking to people at church and talking about, like, oh, I feel so uncomfortable knowing that, like, there's people where I was born who are attacking our churches and bombing our churches. And you could have a kid, and I remember this, some people were like, we need to bomb them back, you know? And, you know, as a servant, like, the people are probably hearing that. What if a kid needs to say and express their anger out loud, but you want them to arrive at the place where you're gonna tell them we need to forgive? If we shut them down and you say, no, God says we need to forgive, you're not giving them the opportunity to work through a complex emotion, and we should be doing that because this is the place to do it, right? Because at the end, you have the wisdom and the discernment to help them arrive at the correct conclusion of forgiveness, but they might go to school and they might be with friends who are still developmentally at their place, and they may not get the right conclusion. So it's good to have them do that here. So if you have thoughts in your mind right now that are like, I don't have time for all of this, okay? If I keep letting people talk and reflect, we're never gonna finish the lesson. I mean, okay, that's true. If your goal is to finish all the material in the curriculum, then yeah, you may not have time to finish it. Is that the most important thing? If at the sake of no community building and making kids feel like they're just all a one-size-fits-all monolith of a kid, and you just want to get through the whole lesson, okay, sure, great, you're successful. I, for one, don't want my children attending a class like that, where they're not seen. So if they feel like they're rushed and they're talked at, they're gonna check out. Like, they're not really gonna be feeling like they're engaging with the lesson. You could just, if all of this is feeling like a lot, you could just start with one small thing that you're gonna try. One small shift and just see how it feels. Maybe you do that beginning of class check-in. What's one high and one low of your week, everyone? Let's go around in a circle. Maybe it's just, hey guys, I had a really tough experience this week and I want to share it with you, and I want to tell you what it kind of taught me about some of the things we're talking about. All of those things are really small, but they have a huge impact. One that I sometimes will hear, sometimes with the classes that I work with, especially in the middle school grades, is they act out or they don't listen. So, yes, you know what? Sometimes you're gonna have a class that is really tough. Like, I can think of one group of kids that I've recently supported, the servants. They are a very challenging group, and it's okay to name that. But when you're in a situation like that, you may have to shift your goals as a servant. The goal might not be we get through every unit. The goal might be we get through some, or like these 2 or 3 essential components of this unit, and the kids feel like we are happy to see them. Because if you are dreading every time a group of kids comes through your door in service, they're gonna know. They know, they always know. Especially, like, sometimes people will come to a servant and they'll be like, Mina doesn't wanna come to class anymore. That's not because of only Mina and his friends. It's also because of the way we're running the class. I know that's an ugly truth, but we have to sit with that. Like, we actually have to sit with that. If some of the kids don't want to come to our classes anymore, we really have to reflect on why. And not just say, well, oh, they just don't like Sunday school. So, another one, I was taught to teach by telling. Were you? Who here was taught to teach by telling? Who here remembers anything from a 1-hour lecture that they received, but there was no, like, deeper engagement? I mean, I'll tell you about one servant, Besim Nassim. Besim Nassim, love Besim Nassim so much. He was my teacher in high school, okay? I will never forget the lesson that Besim did for us on marriage, where he used his own wedding photos in the slideshow, and I will never forget how funny he was and how kind he was when he talked about how it's a big step to marry someone and how that's a sacrament. And I just remembered that forever. He made that very meaningful for us. And actually, Abuna Sam and I talk about this a lot. I very rarely remember what someone taught me, but I can put it into practice because of the way they made me feel in their class. What if they say something wrong or off topic? Okay, this is a big one. Let's say, for example, you're teaching middle school or high school. You're talking about a subject and someone brings up something political, for example. Politics is a big deal right now, very divisive climate. It's a big deal. I'm gonna say something and I'm just gonna be very clear. As a person who was asked a lot of educational questions in this community, you should not share your political beliefs with anyone. Because if you have political beliefs that are different than the parents or kids, you are using your place in class as a place of, like, you're a role model and you might make that person feel isolated. Okay? I'm sorry if you disagree with me on that. You should not share political beliefs with the kids in your class. You can share values. You can share thoughts about like big subjects like human rights because those are in line with our church, but you should not share like who to vote for. You should not, like, consider it like as if you are like an employee at a place. That is something that I feel very strongly about. And unfortunately, in the past few years, I have seen people do differently. I do not agree with it whatsoever. So let's say, for example, one of the kids says something political. Now, they're allowed to share what they'd like to share. But let's say, for example, you're not sure how to handle it. You could say, you know what, you're bringing up really great questions. I really want to hear more about that. I think, what if we have a conversation about that one-on-one? Because then you're not shutting them down, okay? What if they say something off topic? I'm not sure if you know this, but middle schoolers in particular, around 5th and 6th grade, something happens in their brain where it's like, I'm gonna say really weird stuff, and I'm gonna say it out loud. And they'll say so I work in schools and I observe teachers and students in K through 12. For some reason in 5th and 6th grade, they go crazy. They'll say things like, I walked into a class the other day and one kid just looks at me and he just goes, are you the president of the United States? And I was like, wow, that means I look good today. Okay, I'm wearing like a good blazer today. But then also he goes, did you know that grass does not taste good? I'm just like, the fact that that means you tried grass during recess, like they just do really weird stuff. When a kid says something like that, just be like, okay, I'm gonna keep going, okay? Some kids just don't wanna engage. Wrong. All kids wanna engage and all kids wanna learn. Remember during the last workshop, I asked, I think it was Nathan. I said, when did you take walking lessons? And he said, I never took walking lessons. I just learned how to walk when I was like 1 year old. Exactly. Our brains and our bodies are born with the gift of learning. Every single person in this room learned how to do things that were inherent in them and do really critical thinking in order to survive. That's the beauty of the way God created our bodies. So kids want to engage, it's just, are we creating that opportunity for them to engage? I don't feel equipped, I'm not a teacher. I mean, you might not be, but you might not be a teacher, but you're a servant. Way better. A servant is thinking about what kids need and how to serve them. You don't need to be a teacher. You don't need to have my degrees, okay? You just need to really care about the kids and want to serve them and not make yourself at the center. All right, so what is one small shift that you might make in how you teach? Now, if you already teach, great. You have like real examples that you can use. But you can also think hypothetically. What's one small shift from how you originally thought about serving kids that's going to be about community building? How you open a lesson, how you invite participation, how you build routines, how you respond. That is going to help share power and affirm kids' capacity and who they are and their dignity. Like, I think sometimes we don't think about this. Kids have dignity. We should always think about how to honor that dignity. Because if you think about, like, I think I might be, I don't know if I'm the only one in this group that has children. But if I think about, like, my kids and how I want them to feel in any class, I would want them to feel respected. And I would want them to feel that they are seen as a whole person with wisdom and gifts to bring to anywhere they go. I wouldn't want them to feel like I go to class because I'm dumb and I need to learn how to be a good person and a good Christian. They're all already coming into any class with a lot of gifts. So we have to look at them that way. So talk to the person next to you about your response to this question, and we'll share, and then we're going to end. Look at me being all right. So hopefully you had a fruitful conversation. I just want to end with this, and I also have one more thing I want to ask you to do. This is something that kind of reminded me of what we talked about today. If you extend your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Isaiah 58, 10-11. So I will tell you this. I often, because we're all human, regularly ask myself, like, do I have any impact on the kids I serve? Because sometimes if you are really exhausted, if you have a lot of responsibilities at work, if things are really busy, the world feels like a challenging place, it can be really easy for the devil to get in our minds and say, what's the point of you going to Sunday school? I mean, you're not teaching today, and then what's the point of you going to Sunday school? Being present is really important as much as you're able, but even if you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to say a prayer for one of the kids in your class, that's really important. And when I see, oh, there are my kids right now. When I see kids that I served in summer camp 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and they come up to me and they're like, I'll never forget when I was crying during activity, whatever, and you just sat with me. I'm just like, oh my God. I probably sat with you because I was exhausted, but that action had an impact on you, and God kind of sends you those gifts sometimes to show you that what you do will be like a watered garden. You don't know what's going to happen in the future, but the kind of community that we want to build is one where the service keeps multiplying, okay? So, thank you so much for having me. I love being here. This is my favorite thing to do. May I ask you for a favor? Because I am always learning and growing as a servant, and I want to help you connect meaningfully, could you please fill this out? And I will use your feedback to shape our next workshop, if you will have me. So much.
Yes. Absolutely. Should we want us to fill it out here right now before we go? Do you want us to keep filling it out here before we go?
You can do it whenever it's convenient for you. You don't have to.
Let's stand up to pray then, and then we'll. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, God.
Thank you, Lord, for bringing us here today, and thank you for this wonderful workshop. And allow us to be better servants and to be able to impact the future generations much better, and through the intercessions of all the saints, hear us, and we say thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you again, Maggie, for coming. We'll definitely have you back in upcoming workshops. We'll continue class next week, same time, same place. And if you didn't get the book that we gave out at the end of last year, just let me know, because I have them here, okay?